Oh, no, that's at the end. Hello everyone, I'm Father Aaron. Welcome back to
The Dungeon Minister!
Now, when last we met our heroes, they had just cleared out the keep, defeating the nefarious kobolds and the evil gnoll who was in charge of them. One of the things they learned was that those kobolds that they had defeated down at the caves along the roadside were not acting on their own. They weren't that brave. They were being bullied into being there. Because again, kobolds are cowards. The party brings this information back to Honeywood, along with the halfling whom they freed from the keep. And they report it to the mayor. Now, the mayor hears this and he gets a bit uneasy, and he starts thinking. And the boys start thinking too in the meantime. That hand motion is incidental, but it's probably accurate. For one thing, my middle boy decides that while he didn't want to play an elf, he does not want to play a cleric either. What he wants to play is the halfling, who they just freed. And I tell him, okay, if you keep changing characters, you're never going to raise levels, but then elves take forever to get up to second level anyhow, so he's kind of fine with it. All right. The other thing they think is that they want their mama to play as well, so they rope my wife into playing. And so she starts to play as a thief who has come up from the south around Kilmarnock, one of the small villages around Kilmarnock. She has come up because she heard about that first kobold raid. She heard there was some action happening around Honeywood and she wanted in on it. Well, this adventure begins, as so many adventures do, at a pub. Actually, the inn in Honeywood. The characters have been living in Honeywood since they began and have been staying at the inn. They get plenty of money from their adventures to pay for rooms and board and things like that, so it's not a problem. So they're downstairs on the ground floor having their meal when the mayor comes looking for them. You see, he's worried. Those kobolds cannot be all of the kobolds. Tribes of kobolds tend to be in the hundreds. This was just a few dozen. And one gnoll leading them. One gnoll couldn't take over an entire tribe of kobolds. There must be more gnolls as well. And so he comes looking for them to hire them to go investigate further. Find out where these kobolds and gnolls came from. Where is the main group of them? Why are they so far south? Why did they invade human territory? What is going on? Now, as the mayor is saying this, over in the corner, a thief overhears. And she stands up and sidles over and she says, "If there's action happening, I'm in." The group discusses it, but of course it was their idea to begin with, so yes, sure, join our group. So they're going to adventure together. The mayor then says, "I will arrange for you a boat to take you up to the keep." There's a river that comes from the northern sea down and it flows through Honeywood and then continues on to the south. And the keep is situated right where the river leaves the Great Northern Sea. And I did the boat trip, essentially because there's going to be a lot of walking in this adventure, a lot of walking through the wilderness, and I didn't want to add 2 more days of walking just to get there and another 2 days to get back. At any rate, the next morning they go down to the docks to find the boat, and there they see a riverboat. It's a quite large riverboat. And there also is the cleric that my middle boy had just played. There is the cleric, as well as 4 members of the newly minted town guard. And the cleric informs them that he's going to go along with the town guard, and they're going to secure the keep. While the adventurers are off looking for the kobold lair, the town guard and the cleric are going to secure the keep so that they have a safe base to return to, so that in case they need to, there's some shelter that they can get to. There is also the crew of the boat and a pilot to steer her. So they all get on board the boat, and off they go from the docks. And they leave Honeywood. They're going upstream. They leave Honeywood through a newly constructed river gate. Now, this is something I forgot to mention in the last adventure. After the encounter with the kobolds out on the road, the mayor right away starts to act and begins the construction of a palisade wall to go around Honeywood. There hadn't been any fortifications. It was an unprotected town because there had been peace for 200 years. There was no use for a defensive wall. Now the mayor thinks there's good reason to have one. So they've begun construction, and when they got back from clearing out the keep, it was further along. And now as they leave, the construction has continued apace. So they go out through a river gate. They sail through the farmlands that surround Honeywood and soon come to the forest. It looms up in front of them, dark and still. Now, not Mirkwood dark, but dark and still. They can hear animals and birds, but overwhelmingly the sound they're hearing is the flow of the river and the steady rhythmic stroke of the oars in the water. Here's where I plan to have a little fun with the adventurers and to add just a little bit of color, something that's not going to materially affect the adventure, but will add some flavor to the world. As they go and they're hearing that rhythmic stroke of the oars and the flow of the water, about halfway through, around noon, they start to hear something. Laughter. They can't see anything. They don't see anyone out there. They just hear this laughter, and then a voice. A voice comes from somewhere overhead.
Oh, look, it's Fleetwood the elf and Bob Johnny too.
Those are the names of the two elves. My eldest is playing Fleetwood, and my youngest named his elf Bob Johnny.
And there's Touchberry the halfling. And look, it's Fire up from the south.
That's the name of the halfling, and my wife's thief, obviously. And they're a little freaked out. How do they know our names? How do they know where Fire came from? What's going on? At this point, my eldest shouts out, "Who are you? We can't see you. Where are you? We can hear you, but we can't see you." And another voice says,
Of course you can hear us. Your ears are so big.
and suddenly, his ears start to grow into donkey's ears. Now, the party starts freaking out. And then they see them, swooping above them, through the trees, back and forth, little people with wings on them. They're sprites. No, not that kind of sprite. Better. They're sprites. And sprites, as the Dungeon Master's Manual says, they're tricksters. They like to play pranks. They like practical jokes. They don't want to fight, and they will not fight unless they absolutely have to. And so these guys are just having fun with them. But the party is a little freaked out. And so my youngest he's got a great axe. Bob Johnny has this huge battle axe. And so he starts swinging the axe, trying to swat him out of the sky. Well, boom! The axe turns into a sausage. And then one of the oarmen takes his oar and starts trying to swat them as well. And bang! The oarman's head is backward on his body. He doesn't feel any pain. It doesn't hurt him in any way, but suddenly he's looking that way. Then the cleric says, look, I've heard about these. They're sprites. Yeah, sort of. They're just tricksters. Don't worry, the magic wears off after a little while. Just don't respond. It's not worth getting into it. So they say, hi, okay, that's very funny. And they keep sailing. Now, the reason I put the sprites in there, again, was for some flavor, some interest, something funny and fun. But also, because I thought it might be useful at some point in the story, I might need to employ a voice from outside of the story. Someone who can speak into the story, who has knowledge beyond what the characters can see. And you remember from The Hobbit, as the party goes to Rivendell, the elves there are singing, and they sing about Mr. Baggins and Ori and Owen and Glóin and whatnot. They seem to know their names. They know Baggins, even though Bilbo has never left the Shire in his life. And the explanation, of course, is, well, they're elves. They know things. Well, they're sprites. They know things. So I thought it might be useful to have that in the future. And so I just kind of wanted to slide that in as a funny, fun thing, but then that could come back at a later time. Anyhow, they get past the sprites and they move on. And not long after that, they reach the Great Northern Sea, where the river exits the sea and heads down to Honeywood. Off on their left, through the trees, they can see looming the shape of the keep, low and dark on the top of the hill. Now, when they were here the first time, they never did any exploration around the keep. They went into the keep, they fought the monsters in the keep, they took the treasure, they buried it in the woods. That's as far as they got. They kind of went into the woods and they buried all the copper, the stuff they couldn't carry, it was too heavy. But they never really looked around. They never did much exploring. So what they didn't see, they see now. They come out of the river and around to where the keep is and the shoreline, and there is a dock. Now the dock looks like it is ancient, big stone pillars holding it up. The wood, however, is clearly newer, maybe a few decades old, and in places it has been patched and repaired with much newer wood, much newer repairs. So this thing has been here for generations, and it's been repaired and rebuilt at various times in its history. The most recent repairs don't look very old at all. More astonishingly, tied up to this dock is a galley. Now, it's not a huge galley, it's not a big ship, but it is a galley ship with rows of oars on either side, clearly meant to carry quite a few people. In fact, looking at it, they figure it could probably have carried almost all of the kobolds and the gnoll that they met at this keep, and maybe even a few more who were down at the caves or the ones they met on the way to the caves. It's a big boat. And so now they're thinking, here's a boat, it's floating. It's not in great shape, but it's not awful either. It's floating. And it clearly isn't left over from the last time humans came here, which was decades ago. So it must have belonged to the kobolds and the gnoll. And then they put two and two together and say wherever these kobolds and gnolls are coming from is probably close to the coast of the northern sea. Otherwise they wouldn't be coming in a boat, right? It's not super far inland somewhere. That is supported when they go to tie up at the dock. They go to tie up their boat so they can, disembark, and there, hanging from one of the posts of the dock, is a piece of rope. Now, it's not a huge rope. They look at the galley, and that is tied up with big, stout ropes. This is a relatively thin rope, but it's been cut, and the cut looks relatively fresh, like it was done recently. And again, very proud of them, they put this together pretty quick. Those kobolds, whom they had imprisoned up in the last remaining tower of the keep and who had escaped through one of the arrow slits, those kobolds must have taken a boat. There must have been another boat, a smaller boat, because it was only two kobolds. They couldn't handle a big boat on its own. Plus, it's a thin rope, so it couldn't have held a big ship. They must have taken a boat and scooted off, which just enforces the idea that wherever they were going is somewhere that can be accessed by water. So the adventurers get out of the boat, and the pilot says, okay, we'll be back in 4 or 5 days to pick you up. If you're not here when we come back, you'll have to walk home. Okay, fine. Off they go. The adventurers and the cleric and the town guards begin to make their way up to the keep. Now, they're a little bit nervous. Was that galley there the last time? Because they didn't explore. Maybe it has been there all along, or is it just arrived? They know that 2 kobolds escaped, and they must have gone somewhere and told someone that the keep had been attacked. Have they brought down reinforcements? Are they going to find this place now just jam-packed with kobolds? Jam-packed with kobolds. What's going to happen? They approach the keep. There are the doors hanging loose on their hinges as before. They open them up and go in. All is quiet. They don't see anyone. They proceed further into that central hall when, boom, an ambush from behind. Out of the 2 guard rooms near the door, 3 gnolls jump out and attack. Now, the adventurers had led the way in, along with the cleric, who was a friend of theirs, obviously, followed by the town guard. So the town guard actually takes the brunt of the attack at first. And the adventurers now have to kind of pick their way around through all the garbage in here, stench, and get themselves into the fight. So there's a bit of a struggle as they fight these 3 gnolls, but the gnolls are well and truly overmastered, and one of them dies. One of them cuts and runs out the door, but the third they capture. They disarm him, they subdue him, and they have him prisoner. The cleric leads 3 of the town guardsmen. One of the town guardsmen was seriously wounded, but the cleric leads the other out the door to chase that gnoll. Meanwhile, the players have this captured gnoll, and they begin to question him. What are you doing here? Where did you come from? Why aren't you up in the mountains where you guys live? What brought you down here? All the gnoll will say is, mountains no good no more. Gnolls aren't terribly smart, right? Why? Why are the mountains no good? Why did you leave the mountains? All the gnoll will say now is one word, morag. Morag. Now, instantly they pick up that this is a who, not a where or a why or a what. They get that it's a who, but he won't tell them anymore. About this time, the cleric and the 3 town guards return. They have caught up with the gnoll, they fought him, they killed him. And they say he was running down a trail that headed sort of northwest from here, looking to go along the coast of the northern sea. So there's a trail, and there's these boats. They secure the keep, and they're going to spend the night here. They tie up this gnoll and they stuff him in the same room where Touchberry had been kept prisoner. They thought that was, kind of justice. So the next day they wake up, the sprite's magic has worn off. I should mention that during the fight with the gnolls, Bob Johnny was nearly useless because his axe was still a sausage. All he had to fight with was a dagger. So the next morning, though, the sprite's magic is worn off. Fleetwood's ears are normal. Bob Johnny's axe is an axe again. And they're going to go off and they're going to hunt down these kobolds. And they're going to head out, but which way? The cleric offers to help them with the boat. It's a large galley. The 4 of them could never have made it work, but he figures that even with one of the guardsmen injured, they could get together and together man that galley and make it sail. But none of them are really boatmen. None of them know boats that well. A couple of the guardsmen know boats, but really not well enough to handle anything that big. And so they decide, no, we'll follow that path that the gnoll was running down. It's just easier, right? So out they go down the path.